Will Newcastle United bring back the intensity against the Citizens this Saturday? Will we see the old Newcastle come back? And what are our thoughts on the latest contract signings and also Eddie Howe's press conference? Let's find out here on Toon Tactics TV, folks. All right. How is everybody doing? I hope you guys are having a great evening, a great time. Whether you're getting ready to go out, whether you're staying in, I hope that you are safe, you are well, and you are going to have a great show here on Toon Tactics TV. So obviously, folks, we're going to talk about the game. We're going to do a tactical breakdown, but we're also going to be talking about some of the things out, just the context around the game at the moment, Eddie Howe's press conferences, some latest news and updates as well with Newcastle that could also impact and have a ripple effect on the game itself. But first of all, as always, guys, let me know how you're doing, where you're watching from, and hopefully all is well with you. So first and foremost, if I bring up some of the latest information on Newcastle United, let me know what you guys think of this. Let me make sure that you guys can see this on my screen. I always get worried that you guys can't see it on my screen. So Anthony Gordon, according to Fabrizio Romano, says, important detail on Anthony Gordon's new deal at Newcastle. Been told it will be valid until 2030. So it's a 6-year deal. What else does he say? He says the agreement is done, according to Fabrizio Romano, and it's going to be for the next 6 years and not 5 initially. Key move for Newcastle, long-term ambitions. And of course, we have seen other reports that suggest that initially Mr. Gordon was demanding to be one of the highest earners, but eventually had ended those demands and essentially took something a little bit lower, which is interesting as well. What do you guys think? What's you guys' thoughts on Anthony Gordon? Me personally, my initial thoughts is very, very positive to hear that we've got one of our blue chip players, i.e. obviously Anthony Gordon, tied down to a long-term deal. Obviously, that's now Bruno Gomes, Anthony Gordon, and we've also we're waiting for Alexander Isak himself to hopefully be tied down as well. And it's really, really important to have some of those key players, long-term futures at Newcastle United. Obviously, Harvey Barnes, Joe Linton are already tied down, but Bruno, Isak, and Gordon have been very, very important to us. What's you guys' thoughts on that? Me personally, we talked about it last week. I think we talked about it for a good little while in terms of contracts of Newcastle United. You know, there's about 10, 11 of contracts that have got a year left in them. Gordon had 2 years left on his. We had the whole situation with Liverpool. We had the whole situation with PSR where there was a concern, there was a danger that because of our inability to sell players in the previous transfer windows that would have to sell Gordon. And in fact, according to Mark Douglas on the Iron newspaper, our negotiations with Liverpool had gone as far as payment structures, meaning there was a fee agreed between the clubs, and all they was trying to work out is how much and in what parts, kind of installments you're going to pay. So that would have also meant that Anthony Gordon had said yes to Liverpool. Newcastle obviously said yes to Liverpool. All of that had been agreed. So for the fact that we've gone from that total 180 from that to now, hopefully, we're waiting for Newcastle's official website to confirm this, to Mr. Gordon agreeing a 6-year deal, it will be absolutely fantastic in my view. And I know that especially in the last game, people are talking about his body language. Eddie Howe talks about it. We'll explain it and talk about it in the press conference when we get to it. But overall and broadly, Gordon has been absolutely exemplary for Newcastle United. So I, for one, am very, very, very happy that he is tied down. But let me know what you guys think. And I think also to have one of the top left-wing forwards in the league also lets you know that there's still breath and there's still a lot of life in this project. As of some people have had concerns that have Newcastle lost their momentum. Are we ever going to be in the league club? Are we going to be at the top of the tree? I think we are. It's just going to take a little bit longer than it has before. There's some other things that another kind of article that was released by Mark Douglas, because the length of it and the detail of it around PIF, around the plans for new training ground, the plans for the new stadium, that will be an entirely a show within itself. And I'm gonna make a show of it. So do tune in for that. But there's a lot of things going on in the background in the Newcastle hierarchy and in terms of plans going forward. And obviously, Mark Douglas also summarizes some of the key stuff from the press conference, which we will do and we'll mention as well. Some other rather sad news, tragic news in my opinion, is that Mr. Darren Eales, Newcastle CEO, as reported by Newcastle United's official website, is that CEO Darren Eales is to step down from his position after being diagnosed with chronic form of blood cancer. He will continue to lead the club's executive team until a successor is appointed. My prayers are with Mr. Eales. It's obviously tragic and it's hard for him and for his family, and the fact that he has, in my view, been still working, still very much at the coalface in terms of pushing the club forward. Not every decision, not everything that he has done, people folks have been happy with. I personally, not saying that anybody's a saint or a sinner, but I personally I disagree with some of the negative views. But I pray for him and his family that all will be well, that he will be healed and everything will be okay. So there's just so much going on for Newcastle in that regard: stadiums, buildings, CEOs, and everything else. So and another exclusive for Mr. Hope. He's been coming out with a lot of exclusives recently on the back of Mark Douglas. I feel like when Mr. Mark Douglas from the Iron newspaper releases stuff, everybody needs to try and find out some new things. Obviously, a significant break. He did announce that we talked about the Gordon breakthrough. He did also say that Newcastle are looking at Edison, not Edison, the goalkeeper of Man City, would love him, but Edison from Atalanta, the DM that's there. We'll have a look at him at some point as well. So I'm sure I see Connor there, Toon Talks on there. I'm sure you've got him on your list, Connor. Add another midfielder to our ranks there. I really like Edison. I've actually did a show on him before as well. So we'll be looking at him again. It'll be really good if we do get him. The other, and this obviously goes back to we talked about stadium from Mr. Mark Douglas himself around stadium, senior management, and everything else on what's going on in the background for Newcastle United. So let's get a little bit closer to the action. We've talked about stadiums being built, contracts being extended. So some of our blue chip players. Before we head on to Eddie Howe's press conference, which I thoroughly enjoyed. I always like Eddie's press conferences. Always like Eddie's press conferences, because on the face of it, he gives a lot away. But and maybe it's more of a figment of my imagination, I can see that the wheels turning constantly. He's always, I think whatever he's saying is the opposite of what he's thinking sometimes. But in this press conference, in my view, he had been quite frank on a lot of things about Newcastle performances, player performances, and everything else, which is very, very good. But before I do that, before we go through a few of the clips, let's read some of the comments. Good to see some of the folks here as always, Adieri. Good to see you, sir. Always here from the beginning, always consistently, always great to have you here. Hi, Philip. How are you? I'm very well, sir. Thank you. Darren Eales stepped down from Newcastle, and Amanda Stabley, CEO of Newcastle United. Goodness gracious. You know what? You're consistency. You've always consistently wanted Amanda Stabley back. Well, you never know. You never know. We'll see what happens. I think, in my personal opinion, that will be highly unlikely because I don't think the ownership, PIF in particular, would want the same sort of imbalance in the corporate part and the board as they had before with Staveley there, especially with Paul Mitchell. Paul Mitchell is their man. Paul Mitchell, Darren Eales, they are trusting those guys to fulfill their vision for the club. And if it sounds like, I know there's always different reasons why people have left, people have gone. No one was there. I wasn't there when it happened. So we can only go off rumor and conjecture. But I think there was a power imbalance in the dynamics of it. And I just doubt that they'd want to rehash those things again. But you never know. Connor, Toon, how are you doing, sir? Hope you're well. I'm getting my words up in the problem. Really, really good to see you, sir. Really good to see you. Let me know what you think of Edison. Oh, you did. I've got a comment here on Edison. Great. I'll get to that in a moment. Adieri getting, hi, Philip. How are you? To step down because of blood cancer and Amanda Staveley. Oh, yeah. Sorry, you answered that. Yes. So I don't think we'll come back. Connor, no chance on Edison as big clubs interested in big fee and wages. Well, thank you for shooting that down so quickly. I appreciate you. And you know what? You're right. I know from before there's like a starting fee of 35 million. That's before he was as well known as he is now. Goodness knows. Like I said, the way I understand it, we've done it before. We looked at Mr. Paul Mitchell's history. We're going to get Edison not only before he went to Atlanta, but before he probably played for a few other clubs as well. That's the kind of Edison. With our midfield, we talked about it a couple of days ago. Our midfield compared to our defense, for instance, is in a much healthier position where we can get, for instance, a version of Joshua Achipong, who's 18, and obviously we're looking at for our defense, but he's probably about 18 months, 2 years away from start as a starter. We can probably get our version of a Joshua Achipong in the midfield. You know, we've got Lewis Smiley, fantastic talent, and we need more of the same in my view. So let's move on to Eddie Howe's press conference before we actually go to the tactical breakdown of the game. Really, I was very, very impressed with the questioning from our journalists. Sometimes I'm not always enthralled by some of their questions, not because they're difficult questions, because they're not so difficult. And sometimes I feel like some journalists haven't listened to what was said before and they end up repeating the same things. In this press conference, they very much followed the conversations and they had really poignant questions for Howe. And credit to Mr. Howe, he answered those questions head on and is very, very interesting. The first question, we're gonna look at 4 different parts of the press conference as well. I think it's important to do that because Newcastle have had nearly a week now since that Fulham game. Obviously, the AFC Wimbledon game has been postponed to the 1st of October. So Newcastle have had a week to train for the Man City game. So what's on everybody's mind, everybody's thoughts is, and this is the question from the reporter themselves, is from your reviews of the Fulham game, what have been your conclusions? And you see Mr. Howe there with a wry smile. Let's see what were Mr. Howe's conclusions and what can we deduce from that. Let me make sure you guys can see it on the screen. I'm always worried that you guys can't see on the screen. Brilliant, it's there. So here we go.
Full time.
Yeah, lots of conclusions.
Lots of conclusions. You know, they're asking for conclusions. He said lots of conclusions.
There was one of those games you look back and you see, you always have an instant opinion. That's why it's very difficult when you come and speak to the press straight after a game, because you have sort of your initial thoughts, and then of course, you watch the game again, and sometimes the game reveals itself in a totally different way. I think it was one of those games where we analysed a lot, took away a lot from it, to try and.
I don't know if you guys remember, for those of you that were here in the show previous, I was saying to you guys, and I'm sure you guys do this yourselves, like, especially now, when I'm having to look at games now, I personally, after a game, I tend to avoid giving an instant match reaction to it. He's talking about initial thoughts and stuff like that. I tend to, and obviously he has to give an instant match reaction because the camera is there. He's obligated by the media. I tend to, because I don't have any media obligations just yet. I get the comfort, I get the luxury of, because I've got so much emotion, so much feelings about the game. I know that I'm probably going to give I'm going to have that initial reaction, but then I get to kind of blow some steam off, then look at the game itself, sometimes even without the noise itself, and actually look at the game, look at the tactics, look what's going on, and then I'll give a match reaction which I send out to you folks, because I think I get to be even more kind of a little bit more, especially with the Fulham game. I thought I'll be less frustrated. But from those of you that, for instance, watch the show, remember I've watched the game twice now, and I'm doing the third time review of you guys. As I'm doing the review of you guys, I was deeply frustrated with that game, and how's going to. I think is along those lines himself. What he's about to say. He said he's had initial reaction response to it. Now he's reviewed it a good few times, obviously, and he said there's lots of conclusions from that. And what I'm kind of reading between the lines is what he initially saw. He knew he was frustrated. He knew it wasn't a great game. But from now watching the game from various angles, and you'd have various reports. Remember, you'd have the running stats. You'd have some of the stats that we have in terms of, we talked about, remember I talked about the ground duels. I was exasperated by some of the 0 ground duels attempts, even from Joe Willock, 1 or 2 from, I think it was 2 from Lloyd Kelly on that left side, where they were terrorized by Traore and Tete, but they allowed themselves to get terrorized. Anyway, some of those stats he has in his mind. He has even deeper stats than that that's available to him. And he's saying, there was my initial reaction. Now watching the game, and with all the data, with all the stats, I'm led to even further conclusions from that. So how does he develop that? What does he say?
Implement into our game. So it was one of those games, I think, where you review and you think, no, that we didn't like ourselves. So...
Eddie Howe is a man of very few words. And if I'm not no mentalist, I'm not no behavioral psychologist, but him saying that and some of his facial reactions and what he's saying, he says, I didn't like ourselves. We didn't like ourselves. And look, I think he was fuming. He didn't recognize the team that he saw. 0 attempts on ground duels from some of the players. Just essentially, you can't have, like I said, you can't have any there's no tactics, no formation can help you when your players aren't doing the ground duels. Huge gap between midfield and center and the defense, not stepping up, not pushing. I'll let Mr. Howe elaborate further.
Some honest conversations this week, and hopefully a response.
And how much?
Some honest conversations this week. You know what? When I did this thing with you guys last time and doing the video and stuff like that, I and then again, what I deduce from it, watching what he's saying. He saw the game as he saw the game live, close up. He's talking to the players, he's everything else, and then he does the video review. And I think what he saw, I think he is, even though he's obviously at the game, he's there live, it shocked him. When he's talking about honest conversations, it's not about, oh, you're playing well. These honest conversations were, he was totally vexed. And this is what leads to, we're going to talk about it, I think some of those things and the media guys did a really good job now kind of focusing on that and what he's talking about, what Eddie Howe is talking about when he says, what were those honest conversations? What do you think those things were about? And we're going to lead on to it. And before we get to the next section, we've got a few comments here. My man, Vator Games, how are you doing, sir? Oh, I got myself. Did I take myself off? What's happened here? Here we go. Sorry, I got so excited. I got to put Vator on. Vator, how are you doing, sir? Vator, incredible streamer, a real gentleman. And I've done some shows with him as well. Man City fan. Really good to see you, sir. Big game this weekend. Large up, TT. Big up to you, sir. Big up to you. I should have done a pre-match preview with you, I think. That would have been great. I'm sure we'll have many more. Look forward to it. Adeyeri Kanguma. Hi, Philip. How are you? Salia starting the first of Newcastle. Do you mean Sandro Tonali? And you will see from the technical breakdown we do. I'll give a spoiler alert. He starts for me 100%. Connor, the club are looking for a new CEO. Excuse me, sorry. The club are looking for a new CEO who is more commercial side and financial expert. I read, who is more commercial side and financial. What do you think of that? What do you think of that? What does that kind of indicate in terms of us going forward? Because they obviously first took on Darren Eales because of how his history of like in Atlanta in America, building a club from scratch almost. If they're looking for someone that's obviously, my initial reaction to that is if they're looking for someone with commercial and financial expertise, that's the kind of area they're looking to grow into, which is very, very, very interesting and probably ties in with Paul Mitchell a little bit in terms of how he does his recruitment. Adeyeri, hi Philip, how are you? You should start. Oh yes, I read that one, I think. Oliver Simon, how are you doing, sir? Hope you are well. Hope you're well. Philip, how do we win this game? I feel you there. You know what? Put it this way, we've got a narrow path to victory. And we're going to talk about it in a moment. Connor, Isak for me should not be risked tomorrow as the game is a free hit, as not expected to win. Also, more winnable games coming up. Isak isn't an outlet striker and hold up the ball. I see your logic there, Connor, and it's hard to disagree with. The only part I would disagree with, I don't believe in free hit games. I don't believe in free. I'm so anti that. It's incredible. There's no free hit games for Newcastle United in my personal opinion. And there shouldn't be. If we're ever on the road to becoming elite games, and I wonder if Vator's still here, seeing his team from coming from very similar part of the journey of where we came from to where they are now. It's not just a financial change, getting players of greater ability, commercial side. There's a mental, there's an elite mentality that comes into it. If Newcastle come into this game, in my view, of seeing it as a free hit, the fans included, we're forever going to be mid-table, 8th, 6th team. You have, before you become that elite club, you have to almost act as if you're already there. Not in arrogance, not in delusion, but you have to see yourself as an elite team, in my view, before you become one. And so Newcastle have to look at this as a game as an opportunity to win points and gain points. I suspect, and there was this situation last week where this whole thing around Isak, I'm sure his toe is hurting, and Eddie Howe, in a very quick line, did say that he can still play. It's whether they risk him or not. I don't think the injury is as bad as it is. He said it's not as bad as it is. It's about just how much pain he can take. So for me personally, I think he starts. But I definitely agree with a lot of what you said there, Connor. Vator Games. Every watcher hit the like button. Blessed to TT, Toon Tactics TV. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Hope you are doing well. Hi, Philip. How are you? A solid start for Newcastle United. Possibly. If his injuries, if Isak's injuries are a lot worse than we thought it was, It's a possibility. I personally don't think he's ready for it. Not yet anyway. I don't think he's quite ready to face Diaz, Guardiola, and Akanji, for instance. But we'll see. We'll see. Vator Games TV will run a next show soon for sure. I am looking forward to it already, sir. Great content. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. So moving forward, we've talked about what Howe was kind of alluding to very much earlier around. I reviewed the game. There was the initial thought. Now I've got to see the videos, the reviews. He's got the date. He's had the data, the stats, and everything behind it, and it's led to a whole load of other conclusions about it that he didn't initially see in his initial thoughts. And he said, I had some honest conversations, and obviously the media, the press guys did a good job in following up on that. And so let's see what Howe. I forgot what the question the journalist asks here, but let's see what Howe.
The Monopoly game is back at.
Oh gosh, these adverts are absolutely killing me here. All right, so here we go. Oh, I think
in the last few weeks, in particular, the balance of that midfield. What?
All right, here we go. Yes, so I remember the journalist asks Eddie essentially around, do you think that some of the root causes, some of the problems to this, to Newcastle's recent performances are to do with the balance of the team? And he kind of hones in on the midfield. He goes, do you think there is an imbalance in your midfield? And that's what's maybe causing some of the problems. And this is Eddie Howe's response to it.
What exactly is the balance you're looking for in the Newcastle midfield?
It's a good question. What is the balance? Well, the balance is that there's a good harmony between all the players, that we understand our roles, we understand the positions that we're playing, and we execute that and what that position requires. I've got no issue with the balance in midfield. That wasn't the issue against Fulham. That there was sort of a bigger problem.
He's got no issue with the balance in the midfield. He doesn't necessarily think it's a midfield or a tactical issue. And this becomes a growing field. Now at this point, people are like, so obviously, according to Howe, it's not a tactical thing. He said and the key word that he's saying here, again, and people might think I'm sometimes creating a mountain out of a molehill, but Eddie Howe is a man of few words. And you sometimes have to read between the lines, you have to expand on it. And actually, as the press conference develops, you see exactly what he's talking about. But he's very careful in how he says it. He said it's not a midfield imbalance. It's not a tactical problem. He says there's a bigger problem than that. So for Howe, whatever balance or imbalance there is in the team, that even if there was an issue around that, it's not the main issue. There's a bigger problem. There's a bigger issue to that. And I suggest, and I think the press, the media guys do ask him questions on this, and he does expand on this. We talked about it in our show previous, and when we reviewed it. It's the intensity. It kind of leads to the intensity into the game. And what we're talking about tackles, ground duels. We're talking about keeping our lines, midfield, the back line being just not stepping up quick enough. People not being ready, kind of having that sloppiness into out of possession, in possession as well. Just not being aggressive enough. Like I was saying to you, we didn't earn one yellow card. When we were a team before, and that it's an indicator. I'm not saying it's a badge of honor, like I keep on saying it, but an indicator of yellow cards and stuff like that is that you're being aggressive. You're especially for a team that claims to be front football, claims to be high pressing, claims to be high intensity. A lot of those teams earn yellow cards. Those are all the things that Fulham did. They had 4 yellow cards in the first half, and I think they ended the game with 8+ yellow cards. There was a real lack of intensity for Newcastle United. What that comes from, only Eddie Howe will know. He will know that from his individual players. Is it contract? Is it distractions about contract talks? Is it what they're reading on social media? Is it family or personal problems? Is it their physical fitness? I don't think it's a physical fitness anymore, personally. Reading some of the articles, but also reading some of the posts from real respected kind of scouts and people like Sanjay, that people you know about. I think those are the type of and those are the things that Eddie Howe is going to have to deal with in terms of his players on the personal level, but also on as a collective for the team itself. So, a couple more things he talks about. He talks about Newcastle improving not just on one thing, but on every level. Let's see.
Sort of effort and endeavour and application.
It talks through.
So Craig Hope asks him about, is it your lack of intensity? Is it a lack of effort, endeavour, and application?
All the dimensions of the game, our organisation, our structure. So, of course, I think you need whatever team you pick, whether people think it's the best team or not on paper, that team has to commit to what it's being asked to do and then deliver a performance in the lines of what we've been used to watching here. And I think
Eddie Howe says there needs to be an improvement on every level, not just application, not just commitment, not just endeavour, but the organisation, the structure of the team. All those type of things, they need to be improved. We need to come back to what we're used to seeing here. The standards that we set ourselves, we need to come back to them, those same standards. So very interesting, and it's a very honest admission on some of the issues that Newcastle have been facing. So, one more take I took from the game, and I hate these adverts, goodness gracious.
Tactics you're trying to make, or is it something?
Let's see what happens here. I forget the question in this one, but let me know what you guys think so far. What did you guys get from the press conference? What did you guys get from the press conference?
Do the metrics bear that out? And if so, is that
let me just remember, what did the gentleman ask? Again, a really good question. I remember this one being...
Intensity hasn't been there when Newcastle's played this season, the high press that was such a big part of what you are, the aggression, the energy. Do the metrics bear that out? And if so, is that a shift in tactics you're trying to make, or is it something that ideally you would like to get back to the levels you were at?
There's definitely been
so why not? Why is the team not pressing? Why is the team not front-footed as it used to be? Have you changed the tactics? That's the question from the journalist. Like, why are we not doing what we used to do? Is it because we're trying to change tactically, essentially?
No shift in what we want.
So no, we haven't changed. What we're trying to do, we haven't changed. What we're doing in terms of tactically is what he's saying. That's not the issue. You know, those same heights, those same metrics that we used to get, high turnovers, pressing, tackling, ground duels, in order to be the high pressing team, it hasn't changed.
No, far from it. We want to step it up and improve.
We want to step it up and improve. We want to do even more than that.
Prove it. So there's no part of us that's trying to retreat.
So that's part of the thing of what people are talking about. Are Newcastle trying to be more possession based? And I'm sure there's little elements of that. And was talking about that. He's saying, no, we're trying to evolve, or we're trying to get even better to what we were doing before in terms of being that high pressing, front footed, direct, aggressive, and intense team.
Treat and become more reactive rather than proactive. So no. But then you look at our ability to do that, hasn't been of the levels it's been in.
So when I was talking about ability, and he's now talking about quality. And in order to be that front-footed team, be that direct, aggressive, high-pressing team, we've been lacking in quality.
Previous years, and there's been a whole multitude of reasons for that.
And that's true. We've had mountainous injuries last season, and it's just been crazy.
It's not maybe as simple as people think. And of course, I've been trying to manage that behind the scenes with the squad.
he's alluding to a lot of things there when he's saying, I've been trying to manage that behind the scenes of the squad. The team's fit now. A lot of he's got a good bench. What else is happening behind the scenes? Contract negotiations or non-negotiations. Like I said, there's about 10 Newcastle players, 11 Newcastle players in their final year of contract. That's not easy.
But longer term, I've got no doubts we will get back to that style. Yeah, very quickly. It is.
A lot went through his mind that he didn't want to divulge. Very, very interesting. Very interesting press conference from Mr. Howe there. And look, now we're going into the tactical breakdown of the game itself. And in terms of the press conference, we want to conclude. We talked about how obviously Howe had he from what he saw in the game initially to what actually transpired in the game when he reviewed it was very different. It led into various conclusions that that there needs to be improvement on every level. Some of the things they used to be doing very well by themselves they were no longer doing. And he needed to get them back to that situation. And there's various reasons as to why that is. Some of them personal situations for individual players, some of it collective. And he needs to bring them as a collective. And he wants to see improvement on every level. And the Man City game is going to be their opportunity to do that. So how do they do that? And actually, I didn't even get to mention it, but he talked about stepping up the level of intensity in training, for instance, which is very, very interesting conclusions from Mr. Howe. So how do they do that? Let's first of all talk about, as we're doing the tactical breakdown for the game, Newcastle, Man City breakdown. Let's look at the overall stats, first of all, in terms of Newcastle, Man City, the head-to-heads. Is it here? Here we go. Sorry, I had the wrong one up there. Yeah, head-to-heads. Took it off there. Sorry, guys. Here we go. Right. Let's not talk about the head-to-heads for too long, but essentially, yeah, in the last 31 games, there's been 3 wins for Newcastle, 3 draws, and 25 wins for Man City. Obviously, previously, we lost in the FA Cup 2-0. We had an incredible game at our ground where we lost 3-2. And obviously, we beat them 1-0 at our ground. We knocked them out the League Cup. So, in terms of the head-to-head, it's heavily in Man City's favor. What is Man City's form going into this game? We already know about our team. You know I like to focus on opposition, especially at first, because a lot of the times when we're doing breakdowns, when we're doing analysis, people in general forget the untold story of the other side. We know all about our team, and we've talked about our team at length. What's happening with Man City? Well, they're unbeaten in their first 5 games in the Premier League, as well as in Europe and as well as in the cup competitions. Obviously, they just recently beat Watford 2-1. They had an epic 2-2 draw against Arsenal, and a lot of controversy, a lot of media fallout came out of that game where people were questioning Man City's title credentials. And if there's ever a time I wanted to know Man City's fans' view on that, Vitor, it would be now, in terms of how they feel about how people have really jumped on that bandwagon. That do Man City have it anymore? Are they that team? How could they not have beaten a 10-man Arsenal? Obviously, they had Trossard being sent off, and justifiably so as well. But it's not easy to break down a 10-man team. It's not an everyday thing. Arsenal are a good side. And I don't know if, for me personally, I don't think any less of Man City because they were not able to do that. I think too much has been made from it. What is interesting is obviously some of the stuff, some of the antics that have been going in that game. You know, after Man City scored the equalizer, there's that epic video clip of Erling Haaland throwing the ball at the back of Gabriel's head. Again, Erling Haaland telling Arteta to humble himself. Some of the interviews from Bernardo Silva and others complimenting Liverpool and not being so complimentary of Arsenal. And I think on that element, on that side, there is a little bit of chinks in the armor there, in my view. And why I say that is Newcastle fans remember, especially with games against Liverpool, especially at least two years ago at Anfield when we unfortunately lost 2-1 in that game, the way the Liverpool players and fans kind of responded to us let me know that they were rattled. And I think they were rattled because they expected Newcastle to play in a way where that's defensive, that will be in our shell. But it was quite the opposite. We were intense. We were the Spartans that you guys see on the thumbnail that I put on, and we were in their faces, and we had a good we had a good foothold in that game. We really gave it to them, and they were fortunate enough that the referee decided to add 100 more minutes. I've been flippant there, and to them to that happen. I think people were just fans and players and teams weren't ready for this front-footed, aggressive, intense Newcastle United. I think they were expecting for it to be a rollover. And so when I think about an Arsenal-Man City game, the fact that the players are reacting that way, I don't necessarily think they expected Newcastle, Arsenal to be a rollover, but I don't think, I think there's no more hugs and kisses after games between Zinchenko and other players anymore. It's turned into a real rivalry, which is very, very interesting to watch. But in general, as expected, Man City have been playing very, very well. 4 wins out of 5, 1 draw, 13 goals scored, 5 conceded. Again, in terms of FOTMOB ratings for the individual players that they expect to be playing. Obviously, the other really sad news in terms of Rodri's injury. He's out for the rest of the year. It's a knee ligament injury, I believe, as well. De Bruyne is a doubt for the game, though he may come back. Obviously, we know that Oscar Bob has got that broken leg as well, and so they're going to have to adapt. And a lot of eyes are on this game, especially from rivals on Man City, to see how do Man City play without their star man Rodri. And I've had people in my WhatsApps and on social media, rival fans from title challenging clubs wishing us well. And I take it I don't take it at all. I don't take them seriously at all. We're not here to pick up points for them. We're here to pick up points for ourselves, as I always remind them. And so it's very, very interesting to see that. And we will see what Man City we go. So when we're talking about the headspace, the possible headspace, the emotional and as well as intellectual kind of space that Man City players, Man City team might be in, is that they know people as always are watching them to see how they will react when their star man isn't there. And if they are the champions that they are, they would like to show, I'm sure they'll be keen to show people and rivals, and they'll be trying to make a statement in St. James's Park, which is typically quite difficult for them to go to, that they are here and that they are serious about and that they can not only survive without Mr. Rodri, but they can thrive without him. And so we're here to stop that. FOTMOB have given this predicted lineup. My one is slightly different. Let me know what you guys think. They've set out the teams in the 4-3-3, and as Howe pointed out in his press conference, the formations that you see at the start of the games are never the formations that we played. It's just people need to get out of the situation of, oh, you play 4-3-3, you play 5-3-2, you play 4-4-2, all this stuff. It's just what happens in the game in terms of how the team is trying to play, the style of play, and kind of the systems within the game. Some teams go man for man, as Man City often do, and so it's not really about formations in that kind of the starting formations in that kind of scenario. And obviously they've got Burn and Shaw as our centre backs. They didn't do who need to improve a lot. Kelly is our left back instead of Hall. Livramento as our right back. Joe Linton, Gomez, and Tonali starting, as he is starting for me. Barnes, Isak, and Gordon making up our front line. And obviously, the ever-present and record-breaking Erling Haaland for Man City, flanked by Savino and Doku, with a midfield of Kovacic, Gundogan, and Silva, who are technically incredible players. But I'm wondering, in terms of athleticism, how would they do against our midfield? And obviously, the defense, who have no problems with athleticism, Diaz, Akanji, and Gvardiol, in my view, are going to be key to that. Edison, obviously, an incredible goalkeeper with his feet and everything that he does. So there was an earlier question from someone, I think it was Oliver Jordan, in terms of how do we win this game, which is, let me make sure I put this on. Here we go. Which is a fair enough question, really. How do we win this game? I've set out various scenarios in the game, and I've thought about in terms of the game, and I'm going to start with Man City, before I go into Newcastle. I'm going to start with Man City in terms of what's the likelihood, what's the kind of, let me try to see if I can zoom in further. Let me see if I can zoom in a little bit further. Oh, I can't. Fair enough. So this is Man City with the ball, which is going to be a big part of this game. Man City will have the ball. This is Diaz. For instance, in this scenario, Diaz having the ball. What Man City are really, really good at is flooding that midfield. And how do they do that? I'm going to talk about that a little bit here. Essentially, Man City, even though on paper you see 4 centre-backs, you'll see Diaz, Akanji, Rico Lewis. I think Rico Lewis plays above Kyle Walker and Gvardiol. What actually happens, and Veto, you have to tell me this, is John Stones injured? Because he's not been featuring in the starting lineups as of recent. But Rico Lewis, in my view, if he plays, will take up the John Stones role. He'll become that 4th man in midfield and the person who adds the numbers. So Diaz, for instance, in this situation, as will be a lot of this game, you'll see Man City with the ball, with this 3 centre-backs. And you'll see us obviously trying to be as compact as possible. And Rico Lewis will be joining Kovacic in particular in that kind of in possession, almost like a 2-man midfield, in terms of being there to receive the ball from the centre-backs and be able to pass it either onto the wings, onto your Doku, who'll be in that one-on-one matchup with Livramento. Some good battles between them two, key battles on those wings, as well as either transferring that ball onto Akanji, who might pass it onto the wings again. Savino, who's looking like a Riyad Mahrez 2.0 in just how he plays. I've put Lewis Hall. Some people might disagree with this. Obviously, in my starting lineup, I've put Lewis Hall, and I've got Kelly as left centre back and Burn on the bench. Let me know what you guys think of that. Would you put Kelly on the left and Burn on left centre back? What would be your starting lineup, especially in that defence? I've put Lewis Hall there, and that would be an intriguing battle in itself. But I think Lewis Hall and Savino, that would be a great battle in itself. So that's where you have a Diaz trying to get the ball off in the either to Rico Lewis or Kovacic. And part of the presence is not only trying to receive the ball, so it's like a box midfield here, but also take up space. So with Lewis coming up front, it forces a situation where you only have Isak pressing the free in defense, and Harvey Barnes having to follow Rico Lewis in this situation. Because if Harvey Barnes doesn't follow him, and Diaz or Akanji get round him, Rico Lewis can receive Rico Lewis or Kovacic. In this scenario, Rico Lewis or Kovacic get that ball, and it's now a situation where, for instance, Sandro Tonali, who might be looking after Kovacic, might have to step out, or Bruno, who's looking after Gundogan, might have to step out, and you now create a situation that I think is the one that we most are worried about, is Haaland either running in between Shaw and Kelly, or down the channels one-on-one with a Kelly or a Shaw or a Burn. That's the ultimate nightmare scenario, or especially going through the center, as he did against Arsenal, who are probably the best defense in the league so far. So if he can do that to Arsenal, he can do that to us. So what happens in that midfield is going to be absolutely crucial. And this box midfield that Man City will try to create, we have to ensure, this is where we get. I'm going to end this part in terms of the intensity in our play has to be absolutely crucial. Isak, in terms of his press, Barnes has to be there has to be good in his decision making. Anthony Gordon has to be alive in terms of his press against Gvardiol, Tonali and Kovacic. Our centre backs have to step up. Haaland, his presence alone, the fear of what he can do in terms of his pace and his strength often causes any defense backline to just sometimes unconsciously step back and put him in onside situations. And when that ball does break, for instance, to a Kovacic, to a Rico Lewis, to a Gundogan, then that final ball is what is deadly, and you can see Haaland running onto that. So it's going to be absolutely key how our Tonali, Gordon, Bruno, Joe Linton, all are very much alive and alert. But most importantly, in my view, and this is why I've selected Kelly in that, because of his pace, it's not going to be, although it will be important, that he's able to try and match Haaland stride for stride and kind of be with him if he breaks through. But more importantly, in him stepping up. So if Rico Lewis comes in, Tonali's marking him, Harvey Barnes is pressing up, Bruno has got Gundogan, it's going to be important that Kelly follows Rico Lewis, that Kelly steps up, Shaw steps up with him, and that at least you then get a little bit more in Newcastle pushing up a little bit more. And so if the ball does drop to Haaland, he's got a lot more distance to make up in terms of the game itself, and Nick Pope having to be that super keeper. So if the ball gets there, it's either Shaw trying to match him stride for stride, or he won't be able to match him stride for stride, but at least keeping up with him, and Nick Pope being alert, Livramento being alert, and others. And that's the only way in terms of being able to ensure that central threat is away. The other situation is obviously in terms of us pressing Man City. And what Man City are very good at, make sure you guys can see this on my screen, is what Man City are very good at in terms of holding that ball and trying to lure out our players. So we're not so much sitting deep. And Diaz will have the ball here. Kovacic and Lewis will also drop in at times, creating that kind of situation where you've got options and players alongside Diaz, Kovacic, and been able to pass that ball along and kind of hitting the wings. So if they can't get through the center, if Kelly is doing his job and is stepping up, So let me, yeah. If Kelly is doing his job and is stepping up because of Rico Lewis kind of dropping in, and you've got that press, and Haaland is having to step back a little bit more. He's been made a little bit more ineffective. They're going to try and hit us on the wings, and that's where Savino and Doku will be so important. So those 1v1 battles become important, and that's where the likes of Joe Linton, he's going to be vital in protecting and covering for Silva, and Barnes is going to have to drop in, protecting Lewis Hall, and Barnes is going to have to drop in and make sure that any runs Silva makes in behind Joe Linton are covered. And this is where it's going to be so important. This is where it's going to be a bit of cat and mouse. It's going to be a bit of tactical play, nous, and keeping up that intensity, ensuring that City don't just have their way in our midfield in terms of gaining ground and having that domination. This is the other part of the game that is going to happen quite a bit. Is us very much City having their way in terms of possession and pinning us back. And the key to this is not necessarily a bad thing for Newcastle, because what they can do is stifle their wing play as well as defend centrally. So centrally, this is where Sandro Tonali becomes so important because of his tactical nous and everything else. What you will find is that when they are pinning us back, they kind of they literally have that 5 across the front, with 4 across the midfield, and sometimes even 2 defenders back in terms of Diaz, Akanji, or Diaz and Gvardio, and it just forces any team back. And so Bruno and Tonali, so Isak will be here, Bruno will be covering the center, trying to ensure that any channels directly to Haaland are blocked. Tonali will be responsible for dropping in there in those areas, so ensuring that Gundogan is covered and that Shah can fully focus, Shah or Kelly or both can fully focus on Haaland. Joe Linton will be ensuring that any runs from Silva are blocked, because what Man City will be looking to do, especially there, is Kovacic will be joining the fray. And this is where Man City are so high up. Kovacic will be joining the fray. What they will try to do is stretch the play. And this is where they didn't do very well against Arsenal, especially when they had 10 men. And this might be something that Eddie Howe himself had looked at, where essentially they didn't move the ball quick enough, because Newcastle are, for instance, in a flat back 5 or 6 almost. You have to move the ball really quickly. So Savino here has the ball. He has to either play 1-2s or take on Barnes and/or Lewis Hall. I think it'll be Barnes in this situation. If he can't beat Barnes to the byline, he's going to be trying to do either 1-2s with Silva and try to get past. If that doesn't work, what Man City love to do, Kovacic is doing it in this situation. But what used to really happen is it will be John Stones. He'll be or Rico Lewis at times, either Rico Lewis, Kovacic, or leave it to Kovacic. Not Kovacic. Sorry, Kovacic will be here trying to make sure that Joe Linton is occupied. You have Rico Lewis, who's exceptional on the ball, trying to break the lines. So the ball would either come in from Savino or from Silva, and Lewis will be trying to break. Lewis Hall will be trying to break the lines, force Lewis Hall back, for instance, and put people on side, and trying to create that situation where then you can pass the ball across the line with Haaland and all the other players that are there to try and obviously cut it back, for instance, and trying to push back the Newcastle defense. So those are the runs that Joe Linton will have to be especially aware of. Lewis Hall will have to ensure that he's got Silva covered. Joe Linton has to ensure that he covers Rico Lewis's run. And Kelly has to be aware as well for Kovacic and others. Newcastle have to be very, very alive and alert to everything that Man City do. So, what happens though when what was the other? So essentially Newcastle have to be very much alive and alert. I was just thinking, I was caught in two minds because I wanted to show something else about that. So I think those are the type of situations and those type of scenarios are going to come a lot. Man City are going to have a lot of the ball. Newcastle have to be, especially if they're in the mid block, as we kind of talked about. Tonali, Bruno, Joe Linton have to be very much alert to ensure that the ball doesn't get played through centrally onto Haaland, and you get those 1v1 situations with Shaw, with Kelly or Burn, for instance, depending on who plays. The other scenario, though, is in terms of Newcastle, the question obviously was asked, how do Newcastle win this game? And big up to Lapis Prime. Good to see you, sir. Hope you are doing well. The other, as the question was asked, is how do Newcastle win this game? How it was done previously in terms of the game, and we didn't win the game, but the 3-2 situation was Newcastle successfully defensively being sound. What would happen is you can see the ball here. For instance, Man City have been, got 5 across our defensive line. Their defenders have pushed up. Gvardiol, Diaz, they're thinking there's absolutely no threat because there isn't. They've absolutely got us pinned back. They're in that mindset of saying, hey, we're going to show Arsenal, we're going to show Liverpool, we're going to show all these rival fans how we're going to turn the screw on Newcastle United at St. James's Park. And we're going to press the life out of these guys. However, Newcastle are defensively sound. And say the ball breaks. Now, as in the previous game, when we actually went 2-1 up against Man City, say the ball breaks, say Doku is unsuccessful in taking on Livramento, and Livramento now gets the ball. When you have that kind of pivot, and I got this from Sanjay, big up Sanjay on the social media side of things, where he thinks that it will be useful for Joe Linton, for instance, to play ahead of Bruno and Tonali, and where Bruno and Tonali kind of be that midfield pivot, you have that connector between midfield and attack, where we know that Isak has been very much alone, very much isolated, and Joe Linton being that pivot. So Livramento, he tackles Doku, the ball breaks. Now you've got that pivot of Bruno and or Tonali. Say it's going to be Tonali on this side because it's on the right side of the midfield. It breaks Livramento has the opportunity now to create a situation. Either he runs with the ball, and you've got Anthony Gordon, you've got Isak, you've got Joe. Oh, I can zoom in. Fantastic. Oh my word. Guys, for all of those that were straining your eyes, my apologies. We've now been able to zoom in. Now you've got a situation where Livramento can run with the ball, create a 1v1 situation between Gvardiol and Anthony, forcing their centre-backs to come back. Isak comes in, Joe Linton comes in, Tonali with his pace and athleticism can push up, and these were the kind of, especially if you can get Joe Linton and Isak now in a 2v1 situation, because Tonali is running past Rico Lewis. If you can create that sort of situation, it spells absolute danger for Man City, because we have got players that can hurt them. The other situation that Livramento can do is release the ball early. And what happened in this situation in the last game, this time it was Tonali. People remember how Newcastle scored. The ball broke. It was passed on to Bruno, who made a first-time pass onto Isak, and it was Gordon on this occasion. Gordon and Isak on this occasion. That's how both goals were scored. It was Kyle Walker at right back, and the ball broke for both Isak and Gordon, who was following up on them, and it was a 2v1 situation. They were not able to catch up with the pace of Isak and Gordon, who are extremely, obviously, fast on the ball and without the ball, a 2-1 situation, and Isak was able to push, obviously in this case it's a Kanji, but in the game itself it was Kyle Walker, and obviously they were able to score. Very similar situation for Gordon when he scored. But those are the situations, obviously, where it's a bit of individual brilliance from Bruno, obviously from the tackle, from the ball breaking, Bruno with the pass, into the space that's in behind, and the individual brilliance of Isak and Anthony Gordon. That's what people were saying. But it's also a tactical thing. Releasing that ball early is the only is one of the main ways that teams can really, really hurt Man City. And those are the type of situations that Newcastle can only get into if they are defensively sound. But what happens if Newcastle are on the ball? You know, what happens if Newcastle are on the ball and they are pressing against Man City? You know, the few occasions that we would have that kind of territorial dominance, that possession. And this is where it's key from what Tonali, why Tonali is so important. So in the previous examples, you would have seen where obviously we've got that flat back five. Tonali was slotting in next to the Livramento and next to Shaw, making sure that there's no one running in behind them. In this case, he's doing the same thing, but on the opposition end. And this is where his pace and athleticism can hurt Man City. In a physical battle, I fancy between Sandro Tonali and Gundogan, I fancy Sandro Tonali. And Bruno on the ball, you can have an option. Depends on, you know, has the option of either going right to Livramento, and now you're creating these type of scenarios where you can have a 3-versus-2 scenario. If Isak is running in between the channels between Gundogan and Gvardiol, one of them has to follow him. Sandro Tonali running in, Gundogan has to follow him now. You can now create a 2-versus-2 situation with if Bruno lays off the ball to Livramento to Anthony Gordon, who then can create a situation where either you got cutbacks, you get through balls through onto Isak, onto Sandro Tonali, and you can create those situations and score. Hopefully score. I made it sound very, very easy there. But the main point is the positional play of the importance of Sandro Tonali, because without him there, without him busting the gut and getting to the other half of the field, it will be very, very tough to break down that numerical advantage that Man City have. And Man City, despite the individual quality, do the hard graft very well. And so if they do it, we certainly have to do it. And if anything, we have to step it up. The same situation can be created on the left-hand side. And this is why maybe I chose Lewis Hall a lot more, is because of his ability on the ball and his ability to make good decisions, especially in the final third. And this is where Joe Linton gets to be very, very important in this side of things. Akanji is going to be stepping up to try and hurt him, or to trying to make sure that he can't hurt him. And so it's going to be important. So Bruno lets up the ball. He can't just stay where he's at. He has to keep Kovacic occupied. Lewis Hall is now on the ball. Silva has the choice. Does he come out to him? If he comes out to him, he can get it over to Barnes. You've got Joe Linton, Barnes. The defenses know Barnes can hit them from the outside, makes very good decisions. Does he cross the ball? Does he do a 1-2 with Joe Linton and get into the half? It's going to be very, very interesting. Bruno will be trying to also step in and cause havoc in that direction. And obviously holding back a bit, you can't just take the mick. You probably have someone with pace in a Kelly or Livramento to ensure that if the ball breaks for them, as can be the case, especially with Shaw stepping up as he did against Wolves. If the ball breaks kindly for us, we can shoot. But if the ball breaks kindly for Man City, we have defenders at the back in Kelly, Livramento, who have pace, who can keep up with Haaland should the ball break for them. And so there's a couple of ways for Newcastle to win. One is obviously on the counter-attack. The other one is then when being in possession, being good in the possession, having players like Tonali, having players like Joe Linton, being the connectors between the midfield and defence, joining Isak, joining Gordon, joining Barnes in the attack, to be there for the 1-2s, to be there to crash into the box and cause havoc. Those moments will be far more rare, I think, compared to the moments of counter-attacks, in my opinion. But you never know. You never know. Like I said earlier, I wonder about Man City's midfield. I wonder about if we can come back to our intensity that we've been calling on, come back to our strengths, to our aggression. Can we can hurt Man City in my view. So that's the my kind of tactical breakdown of the game. As I've mentioned earlier, Man City are likely to have more of the ball. Are they going to be as quick with it, stretching the play as they are with Rodri? That remains to be seen. Are they going to have the same ability to get back if the ball, if they, in terms of running back as they did before without a Rodri? Gundogan is a year older, Kovacic and Bernardo Silva. I fancy Tonali, even Bruno and Joe Linton in a straight-up foot race. We know what Gordon, Isak and Barnes can do with their pace. So there's an opportunity for us to stretch. But our centre-backs have to be alert. They have to step up, you know. And that's why I chose Kelly over Burn, because that fourth defender, whether it's a Rico Lewis, I don't know about John Stones, if it's John Stones, who are going to be key in giving Man City that numerical advantage. And therefore, the only way to cancel that is if our defenders also step up. So it's going to be absolutely crucial. The other crucial fact is the intangible, and that's the Newcastle faithful themselves, the fans themselves, to play the aggressive and sometimes risky, high-intensity football. They're going to need the encouragement from the Newcastle fans throughout the game, whether we have the ball or don't have the ball, whether creating chances or not creating chances. Because there are going to be periods when Man City are going to have real control of that ball. We have to encourage the team, as we always do. They're going to need it even more. They've had those honest conversations of how they know they've been not been keeping up to the standards. They have to show a good performance. And I wonder if they do choose, and to right the wrongs of the Fulham game and to play in the way that we expect them to play. I wonder, especially in the physical side of that game, in that midfield, can we establish that dominance? Can we create a rhythm in that midfield from the centre backs to the midfield to the forward line to be able to cause that we can hit them, we can press up, we can't hurt them, and can we create that rhythm where, in terms of keeping our lines, ensuring that we're not numerically disadvantaged at midfield? Can we, through our athleticism and our strength and aggression, take over that midfield at some points of the game and really hurt Man City? We know that we can be clinical up front, absolutely. And the stats show that. It's all the other metrics that we have to improve on: ground duels, air duels, tackling, all those other things that we expect Newcastle to have. So, having said all that, guys, I'm going to give my prediction. You give me your predictions as well. I'll be really keen to see what you think. I know what the rivals hope is, obviously, for a Newcastle victory, because they think it helps their title credentials. I don't care what it helps our rivals do. I care what it brings to Newcastle, which is, I hope, and I'm sure we hope, European football for Newcastle United. With all of that said, in terms of the tactical breakdown, I think that Eddie Howe can, and the team will galvanize and strengthen as well. I think we'll see a good performance. I think we'll see goals. I think we'll lead goals as well, because Haaland is on fire. And I predict a 2-2 draw. A 2-2 draw. 2 goals for Newcastle, 2 goals for Man City. I'm going to give Tonali a goal. I think Tonali will score. And I think Joe Linton's going to do such a good job. It's going to give Isak a goal too. So I'm going to go for Isak and Tonali for a goal. I think it's going to be very hard to keep out Haaland. I think he'll score, and possibly a last gasp winner from a Man City midfielder who gets the better on the half space and, you know, gets one of those goals that they do. So 2-2 draw for Newcastle Man City. You guys let me know what your predictions are. I'll be keen to hear them. So, guys, that was the tactical breakdown. We started off the show talking about various updates from Newcastle, Gordon's well, soon to be Fabrizio Romano announced that Gordon has a new 6-year contract. We're waiting for the Newcastle website to officially announce it, which is a very good sign. Isak's contract is also on the way, which is positive to see. And obviously, Bruno, Joe Linton have been tied down. Barnes in long-term contracts. So our blue chip players, our big players have been tied down. There are obviously continuing situations in terms of we have 10 to 11 players on 1 year on 1 year left on their contracts. Your Burns, your Shaws, your Kraft, and all those guys, and you know there's going to be kind of uncertainty there. But it certainly looks like Newcastle are moving in the right direction in terms of their key players. We talked about obviously the unfortunate news for Darren Eales that he's got chronic blood cancer, but hopefully he will pull through, God willing. We talked about the press conference from Eddie Howe, who we talked how obviously Howe had his initial reaction to the game where he thought one thing, but after reviewing the game and seeing it and getting all the data, he realized there's a whole load of other rafter situations, like he said, literally where there needs to be improvement, a raising of standards, not just in intensity, not just in application, but in organization, in structure, midfield, defense, attack, all over the pitch. And he set about doing that on the training field, raising up the intensity of the training itself, having honest conversations with individual players and of the team as a collective. So we're expecting an improved Newcastle, especially under the lights at St. James's Park, being pushed on by the fans. But there's another team there, obviously, that's Man City. And they're out to prove to their rivals that they can, A, play without Rodri, B, they haven't missed a step, and 3, they're going to try and make a statement, try and make an example out of Newcastle to send shivers down to the Premier League. And so it's all to play for. I think it's set up to be a magnificent game between Newcastle and Man City. And I, for one, am looking forward to it. I've given my prediction. I think it's going to be a 2-2 draw. I think Tonali and Isak will be the scorers for Newcastle. I think Haaland probably get a goal for Man City, and a midfielder will probably get a last gasp winner. That's my thoughts on it. Let me know what you guys think. As always, guys, I hope that you guys enjoyed the show. I'm looking forward to the game tomorrow. I'm looking forward to seeing what we do. And I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your evening. And how away the lads. And I hope I'm wrong and that Newcastle win. But let me know what you guys think. As always, like, share, and subscribe. Take care. And God bless, folks.